Hey, this is SEAC retired John Wayne Troxell, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We were talking off mic, getting each other a little bit hot, and so look, we're both combat veterans. We got Tom Behrends coming in here on the show. He is a combat veteran. And I guess I would ask you the way I look at. So I wasn't a sergeant major. I was an E5 when I got out. But when I look at sergeant majors, you guys are the standard bearers. You know all of the heraldry. When I worked at Huachuca, it's a cav post, right? Not cavalry, there's cavalry there, but it's an old cavalry post.
Yeah.
And so the sergeant majors there, when we do parades, they know all of the bugle calls. And you're like, how do you know all that stuff? This is an MI sergeant major. And he's like, okay, look, attention sounds like this. And you're like, oh, okay. And so, I mean, that's what you guys do in my mind is you know all the stuff that we don't know and you teach us, you troop us up. And I don't think people understand what being the standard is. How do you explain from battalion or all the way up to the very tippity top like you did? What is the standard bearer's job? What does it mean to be that person?
Well, you are the ethical standard bearer of everything that is right about the United States military. You know, as a command sergeant major, whether you start at the battalion level, which I did, and I finished off at the SEAC, the senior enlisted guy in the Department of Defense, you basically focus on two things in your relationship with your commander, which is you gain the pulse of the force for the commander, and you do that by circulating with your troops, by PTing with your troops, by being at training with your troops, by in their living areas, things like that, and you deliver the why to the troops. You make sense in layman's terms to the troops what the commander's vision is, the priorities, what the missions you're expected to accomplish and everything. And through your collective group of the sergeant major, the first sergeants, platoon sergeants, all the way down to the team leaders, you provide that kind of inspiration, purpose, motivation, and direction on any given day that gets after building these young men and women into lethal, professional, fit warfighters. And it doesn't change. Obviously, the more you go up, the further you're away from that tactical level, but you're still, your responsibilities of being the ethical standard bearer doesn't change.
I was in, this is when I was in the Department of the Army. I was deployed, and we jumped talks from the interior of Baghdad County, way out east, out to Fobhammer. And, we're just a small team. Everybody's just a small team. And so this one team was trying to move, and there's this adorable little Army captain. And he's like, it's ops sergeant major. He's like, oh, Sergeant Major, can we get some bodies to help us move? And he's like, what are you doing during the day? And he's like, eating peanuts, just kind of like dismissing the guy. He's like having a conversation. And the captain has no idea he's getting sergeant major. And he's like, well, we're working all day. And he's like, when are you done working? He's like 2 a.m. He's like, move at 2 a.m. It's like everybody's got a job here, man. I don't got people for you. Don't you see everybody's busy? And so like when you go to the sergeant major and you're asking for things, and one of the greatest lines a sergeant major ever said to me was, you got what you got. And you're like, oh, right. I've got what I got. Like everything we can get you, you've got. You've trained, you have this stuff. Now you have the mission. Now it's time to go figure it out, get to work. If you're cold, put on a jacket. If you're hot, take it off. All these very simple things. But that all comes from you guys.
Yeah, I think what it's all about, especially as a command sergeant major or sergeant major, is you balance the art of leadership. The art being the necessary accountability and discipline associated with a military organization, along with the empathy, compassion, and caring for the men and women in the formation. And that balance is critical to maximize the efficiency and proficiency of the troops and the organization in their warfighting mission. And as a sergeant major, sometimes you have to say, you got what you got, okay? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't have the time and space to explain why you can't get anything else or why this is the way it is, all right?
Right.
But if you've built this relationship that's built on mutual respect and dignity and trust up and down the line, when you do have to say something like that, the troops will understand and they'll say, okay, roger that. I took a shot. All right, Sergeant Major. But what I see where sergeant majors get in trouble is, one, they try to be over empathetic, over compassionate, and a little under disciplined and accountable. and they start virtue signaling to troops, and they start trying to focus on likership more than leadership. And pretty soon they create a sense of entitlement in the organization, where if the troops don't get what they want, then, oh, the sergeant major is screwing us, or he's toxic or whatever, And that sense of entitlement can create a vacuum where bad things can happen in an organization because of the lack of discipline and accountability, meaning like sexual assault, sexual harassment, racism, stuff like that. That stuff can really rear its head. But then you got the other guys who are just hell-bent on discipline and accountability, and not too much on the humanity and of the people and everything. And that truly is a toxic environment where people don't want to come to work, and they don't want to be around the sergeant major and everything. And so the key to being successful as a command sergeant major is mastering that art of influence, of leadership, which is a balance between discipline and accountability, empathy, compassion, and caring, that will maximize the ability to get after the efficiency and proficiency of the troops and the organization.
When I was in the regular Army, I was in the Army a lot of ways, everybody. So I say these things to give context to John. So I was, good PT guy, and I was in my unit, and we had a LURS regiment attached to us. And so they would never say they're part of the 165th MI battalion. They'd be like, we're Echo Company 51st Infantry, but they were really part of our battalion. But I was one of the harder guys, even with those guys. I was fit and everything else. And one day, just for funsies, my sergeant major's like, you dropped me down to do push-ups, which something he did every now and then. But it was more like trooping than it was punishing, because I wasn't doing anything wrong. Like he was just doing that to kind of fuck with me. And so I'm going to fuck with him back. And I'm just going, and he wanted me to count. So I'm going 0, 0. I'd do 100 push-ups in a row. It's not a problem. So I'm 0. I'm zeroing him. And he's like, get up, and then he waves me off, and we laugh about it, right? Next time I see him and we interact, I'm in a board trying to work on getting promoted. I'm in a soldier of the quarter board for the brigade. He's sitting at brigade sergeant major. He's normally battalion. And I destroy everybody in the board. I win. And he's like, I want that guy's promotion packet, because he sees the potential in me, he understands my attitude and everything. And I look at that, and I didn't do that to try to get promoted. I did it because we're having this fun camaraderie, and it's part of that cultural check that you do in your unit. Like, you got an MI unit, you got a bunch of guys who are soft, and we're stractical, right? We have a strategic mission, but we also need to be able to deploy. And his boss is like, hey, we do PT all the time, every day. No one gets out of it. That's how because he's an infantry guy, but understands he's got an intel battalion. And so he's straddling a lot of different things. And it's not an easy job. It's the other thing I want to add into this, and I'm going to let you talk about it, is what sergeant majors are to me when I see them, especially like in a time of combat. These guys are the best at what they do. They know how to troop up troops. Field artillery sergeant majors, come on. These guys know how to get soldiers hardened. You're going to dig. You're going to live outside. You're going to do fire missions. You're going to be stoked about pulling lanyards. And nobody in the Army has a better unit at that than mine, because I'm fucking great at training soldiers, and my boss loves it. The last thing we're going to do is stay here. We want to deploy. Go get us a job, boss. And then that's what you do, is you get that unit so hard, so ready, that they're all desperate to deploy. That's kind of how I see as sergeant majors. So you're managing the culture, and you're so great at trooping up troops that the only thing you want to do, especially if you're into combat arms, is get to a fight if there is one.
Yeah, and you hit the key word, Pete, and that's culture. Sergeant majors are responsible to take the commander's vision and priorities and develop a focus area that will get after the culture of the organization, or focus areas to get after the culture of the organization. And in the end, you've created this culture of what the military exists for, to fight and win our nation's wars and defend our freedom, our homeland, and our way of life. And when you continue to hit on that and you lead through your example, the troops are going to follow you. I remember, when I was a squadron level sergeant major and deploying to Iraq in 2003, at the very start of the war, and the vast majority of my troops, I did the combat jump in Just Cause. I'm a Desert Storm veteran, so I had combat experience, but 90% of my troops had zero combat experience. Right. So there was a lot of apprehension there. And so I knew myself and those that had already been to combat, we had to lead through our example. And our example had to be follow me and I will guide you and show you what right looks like. And everybody's apprehensive going into battle. You know that as well as I do. But as a sergeant major, you've got to be at the points of friction. You've got to be where you can make the best out of any situation, and you can be the best at assisting the commander and commanders at getting after the mission. And sometimes you get sergeant majors that forget about that, and they forget that that's what they're there to do. And all of a sudden, they put themselves in a role where they kind of marginalize themselves because they're not out leading through that example. And then they want to start going down the road of, well, I'm an old man or an old woman and you guys are young and stuff like that. No, bullshit. All right. If you expect the troops to do X, Y, and Z, then the sergeant major better be doing it with them. Doesn't mean the sergeant major's got to have the highest ACFT score or be the best shot or anything, but whatever he expects the troops to do, especially if it's a dangerous type mission or it's about living in squalor or whatever, then the sergeant major better be out there with him. You want to earn the respect of your men and women, then do what and show what you expect them to do through your actions. And I will tell you, when I was the SEAC and I was working for a great Marine, General Joe Dunford, we used to, I mean, here we have the senior officer, the senior non-commissioned officer in the entire United States military. Every year we did every services PT test, because we were responsible for all the troops. And we didn't want to feel like hypocrites if we were telling the troops, you got to do your PT test, and we weren't doing it up there. So we did it every year for every service. Now, you know, the Army and Marine Corps tests are a little tougher than the Navy and the Air Force. All right. So, but, you know, especially the Marine Corps with the physical fitness test and the combat fitness test, you know, but the bottom line is we were going to lead through our example, even at the strategic level. And so I think when sergeant majors stop doing that, then all of a sudden they marginalize themselves, and pretty soon they find themselves not in the information loop because you know, they're not there where they should be and doing the things they should be, and they're not in the information loop of understanding where soldiers are opening up to them or subordinate commanders are coming to see them with problems and everything. So I think it's important for any sergeant major from the minute they pin on the rank until they retire to be the ethical standard bearer for everything that our country and our military represents.
Yeah, no, absolutely. When I was working, more of a solo element that would attach. And again, I'm not wearing any, I probably was authorized to wear a uniform, but I usually wear civilian clothes because I wanted to be different. And I would go to infantry units. You know, these are hard units with real battle space owning commanders. I didn't know. Oh, here comes Tom. Hey, Tom, welcome to the show, man. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
So, no worries. So I didn't know how to weave in the sergeant major of a battalion or brigade into what I did so that they would understand my value. And so those guys wouldn't like me because I might wear the raincoat that's like an Army raincoat, but then wear like my tan pants and everything. And here's what I figured out was I would go to the sergeant major. I'd say, hey, listen, I go on a lot of patrols. I've been on 500 patrols. You know, in my career, I've been on 1,000, but at the time I'm in the middle of my career and I know what right looks like. And so when I'm in these MRAPs and I see stuff that's unsecured, I'm not going to say shit about it, but I'm going to come to you, but you have to protect because I got to go out and patrol with these guys. And I realized that sergeant majors didn't have a guy like me who could be their eyes and ears, who was separate, I was insulated. And I'm like, I'm also going to tell you when guys are doing a badass job so you can go out and do the fun part of your job. But so for example, I'm on this tiny little fob and they've got a forklift that it lifts up. They're driving around with the stick fully out. And I'm like, Jesus, I can't tell them to stop. I'm not their boss. I'm some fat, dumb old civilian to them, you know? And so I just go see the sergeant major. I'm like, hey, man, I got to tell you this one. And so that's when I clicked it with sergeant majors because I wanted to keep these guys alive. I also didn't want to be in the back of an MRAP with the fucking, you know, mod deuce barrel, not secure. You know, I mean, can you imagine? And I've seen that. I've seen rip-it cases. I've seen coolers. Like, all this shit is unsecure, Sergeant Major. And he's like, I will square that away. And they were desperate for that information because we all wanted to get back alive. And if you wanted to die in something, it's a roll over in an MRAP in Iraq, right? And that was that was when I realized that part of the mission. So for a long time, I kind of dismissed sergeant majors as being irrelevant when we deployed, but I really learned that lesson later on.
Yeah, all of what you're talking about in terms of a sergeant major with on-the-spot corrections and enforcing standards and instilling discipline, that's born out of love. It's not born out of hate or spite. It's born out of love. You love the men and women in your formation. You want them to be best prepared for whatever you expect them to do. You want them to be as safe as they can be, and you want them to be as healthy as you can be. So you go down this road of, hey, and I used to do it all the time at all levels. I would see, a troop doing something wrong, whether it was with a weapon or a uniform violation. And I would say, hey, come here, troop. You know how much I love you? I'm going to show you what right looks like here so that you don't walk around and you're not screwed up. If I didn't love you, I would just walk by and let you continue to look like you do or perform the task that you're doing to an unsatisfactory standard. So come here and let me help you out. And after we get done and I've got the lesson learned, I kind of shake the kid's hand and say, all right, drive on, or his NCO that I had called over there with him, because I wanted them to be the best they could be. And in terms of going to combat, and Tom knows all about this as well, you want them to be best prepared to face the conditions they could encounter on the worst day of their life in combat. And that's what you prepare a lifetime and why you dedicate your career as a sergeant major through selfless service to make sure those men and women are ready.
Hey, Tom, I wanted to make sure we finished that thought. Thanks for coming on the show, man. I really appreciate it. Everybody, Tom is a sergeant, well, has been a command sergeant major in a unit that deployed, and we're talking about this because we're kind of talking about the Tim Walz thing. I'm really not going to bring up Tim very much unless you guys decide to. I'm really talking more about what the right looks like. And I want to take all of us back to pre-9/11. And the Guard today is a completely different unit. I was in the reserves pre-9/11, actually deployed to Bright Star in October of 2001. And they're like, some people are going to stay, TBD, who that is, And so like we were all in this area of disarray. And I went from the regular Army to the reserves. So when I got there, and I'm talking reserves, not Guard, senior NCOs, I'm an E5. They can't even do a PMCS by the -10. I'm like, what is going on here? For a regular Army guy, that's really weird. And so I understand that when you guys, when planes hit buildings, we all know instantly we're going to deploy, especially a field artillery unit. But how did your mindset change, Tom, in terms of like, how do we get these guys ready? What do we need to do? How do I get them from, and I don't know what the Guard exactly was like, but I know what the reserves in Illinois were like, right? And these were not people who were ready for combat. They didn't know how to wear their weapon properly. They had no idea what to do. What was your mindset on 9/12 of 2001?
Well, actually, I would say our Guard unit was pretty well led, and we trained pretty damn hard. In the 80s, I think we were kind of screwed up, I think. And then, then when the Cold War kind of ended, we were pretty decent. I mean, there's other units out there that probably sucked. I mean, that's how it is everywhere. But,
sure.
We when Clinton got in 92, we reorganized into artillery, and we were grunts before that. So our whole mission kind of changed. And we had a NATO mission in Norway where we went and we guarded the border against Russia and kind of had a thing going on. But actually in 2000, I was had 20 years in. My mom had cancer. Dad was in his 80s and had young kids. And I actually retired as a first sergeant then. And, 9/11 hit, both parents passed away before 9/11, which I was glad Dad didn't have to see it because he was a World War II veteran. And my mom was actually in Vienna, Austria during World War II, got bombed and, went through hell there. But, I was glad they didn't see it. But, like you said, 9/12, I think everybody's mindset kind of changed. And mine kind of was like, well, shit, I'm not in, and my soldiers are out there without me now. And it was just a weird damn deal. I ran into the first sergeant that took my position in like the spring of 2002. And he was like, yeah, I'm gonna retire. He said, I've got his job. They had a winter annual training coming up. And he said his job didn't like it or wasn't good. And he had 20 years in, he was going to quit. And I thought, shit, I'm going to see if I can get back in my old position. So that's what I did. I was like you guys just saying, that's one thing that's just great about having this asshole come and run for vice president is that all you great soldiers out there, I'm running into people I haven't seen in 20 years and connecting with them. And, we've got this bond out there. Like you said, you want to do the right thing. You love your soldiers. That's how I was. It's like I got 100 people out there and if they're going, I want to be with them because for 20 years you trained with them. And it's like, how in the hell can you not go with them then? So that's, so then I looked into it and, I went and got a physical. That's like they said, he was hard of hearing. And in 2002, they were going to kick him out because of hearing. They let me back in of bad hearing. I mean, that was, they literally never should have let me in. But the nurse and the doctors, they were like, well, he wants in. He's an E8 already, and let's get him in. I mean, I still can't hear to this day, especially women's voices. But that's kind of another story. But that's how that was, and it was just like if you're in on 9/12, if you're in the military, you need to be prepared to go to war. And if you're into this day, you pretty much know that you're probably going to get deployed some damn place, no matter what you're in. I mean, the National Guard's been deployed everywhere ever since the beginning of this nation. I mean, World War I, World War II, Civil War, throughout. We got people from Minnesota that were in the Bataan Death March that were activated back then. I mean, it's been an ongoing thing. But, on 9/12, if you were in, you were going to go to war. You're going to go sometime. And if you don't want to go, then you got 20 years in, then you need to just get out at that point. Don't hang around and act like you're training your troops for however long. And all of a sudden, when you think it's convenient, you're going to pull the plug. Bullshit. I mean, you stay in until you go with them, and there's plenty of time to put your toes in the sand later.
Did you have a combat patch on 9/12 or no?
No.
Right.
We almost got deployed back when first Gulf War went on, but the regular Army and everybody that was there did such a damn good job that after 100 hours or whatever it was over. So yeah, I mean that's it. We were kind of in the hopper to get this is another thing that was like we were kind I didn't have one. Nope.
No, that's fine. But I know, like when I was in, I was like, how do I get somewhere? Do you get one for Macedonia? Do you get one for? And I was trying to figure out because it's part of the deal, right? Like, how do I get something on this damn shoulder? Well, and so that no one can ever say to me, yeah, like you're awful slick on that right shoulder, and you're like, I'm trying, right? Like and this is before there were any actual big wars to get into. I got one from Bosnia, but we didn't know that was even going to happen until 3 months before we left. So I want to ask you guys both this. When you got picked up for E9 and you had to go Sergeant Major Academy, however you do it, remotely or the resident course, what does that feel like for each of you guys? What does it mean to you professionally? I was never the one at a board that would lie and say, I want to be Sergeant Major of the Army, because I wouldn't lie. I have a different answer. But that was never my goal, right? But you guys got to that spot. What did it mean to you to get to the pinnacle of the entire rank stack? It's the whole thing.
Yeah, for me, it was, my first thought was, because I got selected for Sergeant Major and the Academy on the first, when I was eligible. And it was kind of a surprise to me. And, I thought, am I worthy? Am I worthy to be able to do this? And, and then I got to the Academy and I saw some of the people that were going to be my classmates. And I said, don't disrespect to them, but if this person got selected, then I'm where I should be. Okay. But it's like, okay, your career, your first part of your career is now behind you. And now you have this second life as a sergeant major where you are advising a commander and you are responsible for the health, welfare, morale, discipline of the troops that you're in. So when I got selected, just like everybody, like Tom and everybody else does, and you're told up front, hey, you got to complete the Sergeant Major's Academy, and that is a prerequisite for you to be a Sergeant Major and to go out there. We all knew and what the commitment meant. And so I jumped on it because this is what I wanted to do. And I wanted to be a Command Sergeant Major, and I wanted to be able to lead troops. When I was shortly after I graduated class 51 of the resident course in 2000. And shortly after 9/11 happened, and I knew then I was going to war. And I knew that I was going to be leading my troops in combat. And so all of that process, starting from, hey, you're selected and everything, it meant I am fully in. I am all in to be the best example I could be for the men and women that I am expected to lead in combat.
Is there a better person to go to combat and lead from a sergeant major point of view than you in the Army when you graduate from the academy? Because I know sergeant majors are supremely confident in their ability to go out and lead. I mean, you want that fight, right?
Well, I think you're prepared. You're given the tools to be prepared, and you're promoted on your potential to go out and do the job, but based off of your experiences as a first sergeant, master sergeant, and platoon sergeant and stuff like that. So the Army prepares you, whether it's active, guard, or reserve, they prepare you to go out and do the job. It's your focus, your commitment, and your motivation to go out and take it and get after it and be that example, like we talked earlier, that ethical standard bearer and example for everybody in your organization.
Let me say this in a different way. Do you look at another, whatever, infantry battalion and go, oh, no, you should send them. They're better prepared than my guys are?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
But I mean, it's not a contest, though.
No, right. But that's your job, is to be like, my guys are the best. I run the best damn battalion in the Army. Send us. We're ready. That's what I'm kind of saying.
Because I can't predict tomorrow, I'm going to make sure we're ready today.
Right. Did you need orders to know you were going to go to war?
No, I knew sooner or later. I mean, anybody that was serving, Tom kind of talked about it. On 9/12, the world changed for all of us. And if you were an active duty soldier or a guardsman, especially with the brigade combat teams the Guard has and everything, you knew that sooner or later you were going to be in this fight. Didn't know where, but whether it was Iraq or Afghanistan or wherever, but you were going to be in the fight, and you were going to be expected to deploy and do what is expected of you and your organization.
Tom, when you got picked up for E9, what was that like for you? What was that commitment for you?
Well, back, in 2000, when I got out the first time, I didn't have any. I had some college, just very, very little, and you had to have a 2-year degree to get in the academy back at that point. And then when I looked at getting back in, it was like, okay, so they changed the prerequisites where they kind of changed it so that after you graduated from the academy, they considered it a 2-year degree, because that's literally how much of a commitment it was. So they changed that. So a dumb farmer like me really could be a CSM then, or a sergeant major, which was just like, wow, that's cool. I can do that then possibly. But I mean, we getting picked for that. I kind of did it. I wouldn't say backwards, but a lot of people get chosen for the academy. They do their work and everything, and then all of a sudden a position will pop open, and then they're already being educated. It's kind of what happened with Walz. I think he was selected for the academy, and he did a lot of the non-resident course in Italy, from what I gather. And then I don't know when he was slotted to go to I think he was slotted probably to go to the 2-week resident course in 05 summer, probably June of 05, which he didn't do. But to me, in layman's civilian terms, I feel that the Sergeant Major's Academy, being selected to that, is almost like somebody that's in academia and they get selected to do a PhD. I mean, it's really a huge thing. There's a very small amount of people that get to do it. I mean, you're literally 1 out of 500 in a battalion. That's pretty damn small odds to get that. There might be a lot of battalions have an E9 ops guy in there now, but I mean, we didn't back then. We had an E8. There's one damn E9 over 500. So those are pretty small odds, and it's a unbelievable honor to have that bestowed upon you, to have that, even be, even the option for it to even happen. Unbelievable. And the thing that I loved about it is there's so damn much good you can do for your soldiers. I mean, you can, like you guys were talking earlier about uniform stuff. It reminded me of over there. We had side plates that came over in a conics, and I was like, all right, what are we gonna do with them now? And I'm like, we're gonna put them on. Well, Christ, that weighs another 4 pounds, and I'm like, well, I said, somebody's mom back home wanted those put on us, and we're going to wear them. And if it saves one person's life, then we did our job, because I mean, they didn't send them over here to leave sitting in a Connex and not being the same thing with the groin protector. I mean, I had one of the battery commanders is like, well, we don't need to wear that. We're sitting in a tower. We're sitting down. That's not going to do any good. And I got back, and I was we were in line to get, evaluated medically or whatever. And this one kid came up and he said, "Thank you for allowing me to have children." Because he got sprayed by an EFP, one of them copper sprays, just right in the groin. Yeah. And he had his plate yet with holes in it. If he wouldn't have had that, he'd have been castrated. And I was just, that was worth it. That's what we do. We protect our soldiers. We love them. We treat them like they're our kids, and we want to get them home so they can carry on and have a life as a civilian also.
You guys are talking about love and protecting, and Tom, especially in your case, these are your neighbors. These are your neighbors' kids, right? And so there's a bigger commitment here. But let's talk real quick about the Sergeant Major Academy. You talked about it earlier. There's only so many people that get to go to this. Do you guys even know any Sergeant Majors that would halfway take this on where they're like, I might finish it, I might not? Because I know for me, I would never go to a course if I wasn't 100%. Because I owe it to every soldier who might have that slot to not go if I'm not all in.
I brought this out in 18 and, again in 22. I did have one guy that, was because I said nobody drops out of it. I did not know anybody that ever dropped out of it. I mean, you get that, you bust your ass to graduate. And when you get out of there, I mean, you're a very highly educated military person. I mean, I still breathe military to this day because of all the military training. It's like I tell my kids, I said, I'm sorry, but this is what the Army did to me. I'm never going to be any different. But I did have one guy that, for personal reasons, he ended up having to drop out. He literally went back to being a first sergeant, and but he literally, he had family problems or whatever the hell it was. He never went into detail, but he said I had to resign from the academy, and I got reduced back to E8, and that's where he is at. He never ran around and said he's a CSM. He was wearing CSM rank for a while, but he never ever said he was that ever again. He dropped it like you're supposed to, and that was it was heartbreaking hearing his story. He's the only one I've ever heard of that enrolled in it and quit. I mean, that's like the other sergeant major said there. You go there and you're kind of like, well, if that guy's in there, I guess I'm not that. But I mean, you literally, it's at that point, you literally drag each other through that. They might not be as good as a speech or something, but you get together and you help them write it. You practice with them. It's you make them comfortable being in front of people. I mean, you want everybody to get out of there and get back and train troops and get ready for the next step.
What about you, John? You know anybody who would take a course or take a slot in a school, get into ATARs and be like, I'm going to half-ass this and go to Sergeant Major Academy?
Never.
No.
What Tom described is the first one I've ever heard of, other than, with Walz and everything. Because, again, I use that word commitment. When you are wearing CSM rank, and especially, a lot of guardsmen, like Tom was describing, they get the rank put on them, and then they have to do the non-resident course, and they got 2 years to complete it and everything. And then they got to do the 2 weeks at the actual academy, which is normally in June of every year. But you make a commitment and say, all right, this is the direction I'm going, and I'm going to get after it. I've had plenty of people that were selected for promotion and attendance at the Sergeant Major course, but they made the decision to say, nope, I'm going to retire in lieu of, because they know what the commitment entails. It's either a complete year at the resident course or 2 years in the non-res course. And being part of an expeditionary military, whether you're active guard or reserve, chances are you're going to be somewhere doing something. And so that, hey, I've got 2 years to complete this course if it's non-residents, and then I've got to wear this rank for 2 years, so it's a commitment. And so when I made that commitment, I said, well, this is what I'm going to do until somebody tells me to do something different, because I absolutely love the job of leading troops at this level. Like Tom said, one of 500 in a battalion, and I've got to be that example. And then when I became a brigade guy and a non-level guy, it just exacerbated how I wanted to continue to give back. And I think that's what it is. The minute you make that commitment, it is selfless service. And it's not about you anymore. It's what you do for the institution, your organization, and most importantly, the people.
When you're, all right, I'm just going to be hard here for a second because I really am trying to be a positive thing on this. When part of your regiment's motto is faithful, and you do these things that are not faithful, and I just don't understand how someone can. Look, we all know if we're going to make this decision, if you want to retire, go ahead and retire. That's fine. But you don't do it in this way because it makes you look like a coward. You don't deploy. You don't have a patch. You said you were going to do something. You didn't finish it. You didn't deploy. That's all bad. And then your motto is faithful for your unit. Tom, what do we do with that? I mean, how does any of your neighbors, your peers, your people in the Guard, how does anybody look at that and go, yeah, that's what is that the standard in the National Guard in Minnesota?
Absolutely not. And that's the sad part about it is that guy, he literally has, just set a bad example for everybody to think, okay, that's what you do there. The going gets tough, you just quit. Bullshit. That's why he's called out on this thing. Because it's like, if I would have done that, I'd go crawl under a rock, or I'd more than likely be one of the 22 a day because I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I mean, we had Kyle Miller that he had a dream he was going to die on a mission. He told the chaplain, I feel I'm going to die on this mission. And chaplain said, well, I can, probably pull some strings, get you off of it. And Kyle said, if somebody else goes in my place, I'll never be able to live with myself. If they get, if something happens to him, even on that mission, they backed over a pressure plate IED. He got killed in action. And his mom, I met her. We made a memorial, and we got a likeness of Kyle in bronze, and I got to know her, and she brought that up during this time here after Walz got selected for VP candidate, and she's just like, Kyle went on the mission. What the hell was his excuse? Kyle didn't say no. I mean, everybody's got something better to do than to go do this. I mean, it's like, but like I said before, you got plenty of time afterwards to run for Congress or have kids or do whatever you're going to do. I mean, our nation needed us then, and every damn single one of us. And that was the sad thing with him. I mean, granted, it was a great opportunity for me because I got to go and be with my soldiers, and we had a big hodgepodge because a lot of them were deployed before us. We ended up with a battery out of Kansas and 150 IRR guys that answered the letter and showed up. What if them guys would all have said to go to hell? I mean, it's just absolutely disgusting. And then for that, the spin to be, well, he maybe knew, and maybe it was a barracks rumor, or, well, whatever, I'm just like, the guy, he had a campaign statement that said he knew when it was probably going to be happening. And then 2 months later, he gets out. Well, get the fuck out of here. Nobody wants to ever hear your name again. And just, strike your name off of everything, every document, every obelisk like they got in Egypt, whatever, just go away. But not him, I'm going to get right in everybody's face to this day yet. The guy, I don't know what the hell mental illness he's got or what you call him. People say he is a narcissist and whatever. I don't know how you can even be that way. I mean, I wouldn't even show my face. I'd just be out here under a rock on the farm until I was dead. I'd be embarrassed.
So not faithful, you're saying?
No, no. Yeah.
But so, I get to meet a lot of people because of my job here and everything. And this soldier he's a Navy guy, so he's a sailor, but he's a bomb tech, EOD. And he had done his rotation. He's on dwell time. And one of his troops had to go. It's his turn. And there was some kind of family thing. And he's like, you know what? Don't worry about it. You don't go. I'll go. Not his turn, but he goes because that's what he does, right? And I don't think they have our NCO creed, but, they have the same principles, ideals. And he gets blown to hell, quadriplegic, basically can't speak either. And so for the rest of his life, he's got kids. He's not even sure if he wants to be alive, but he can't even kill himself because he can't affect any of that, right? But he went and did this job. He went to Syria. He didn't ask questions, didn't have all of that. That's like what NCOs do. That's what Sergeant Major set up. And so when people come to you and say, hey, I can't deploy or whatever, you're the guys going, you are deploying or wherever. There is a standard. We do have to go. If you don't go, someone else has to go. Why that person and not you? Whatever it is, all of these things go into the whole bucket of we're going to have to go as a unit. So we are going. Some people do get to stay back. Maybe they had a surgery or whatever. There are reasons why you stay back. But for the most part, if you can possibly go, yes, you're going to get divorced. Yes, you're probably going to have a drinking problem. Yes, some of you are going to kill yourselves. Yes, 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 yes. All these things that are fucked up in your life. Yes, you're going to go bankrupt. But we're all going. And that's really what happens, right? And it's unfortunate, but it is part of what the dragon of war consumes. It takes things from us. Nobody escapes that at all.
Yeah, and I would give you an example. So in 2011 and 12, in 2011, I was the Sergeant Major of all combat forces in Afghanistan, the International Security Assistance Force Joint Command, the 3-star headquarters that was in charge of all the regional commands. And that was the year President Obama initiated the drawdown in Afghanistan. And we were up around 120, 130,000 troops. And when you talk selfless service, by 31 December 2011, we had to be 10,000. We had to be under 120,000. And so on December 31st, the deadline that we had to meet that number, the president's number, we were shoving troops in the back of C-5 or C-17 aircraft and C-141 aircraft, C-130s at Bagram Airfield to get them out of there because they didn't want to leave. They felt that I came here for a mission. I came here to do my tour for a year or whatever it was. And you're telling me I got to go home after 6 months? No, I don't want to go home. That kind of selfless service is what our military is all about. And when someone says, yeah, I think I'll do it, or, yeah, I think I'll go. And then all of a sudden, well, no, I changed my mind. I'm not going to do it. Or, like the leaders I've had to deal with 20 years as a command sergeant major, where they're kind of like this guy, where they operate in a gray area. It's not black or white with them in how they address themselves. So if somebody asks him, what's your combat experience? He'll use the phrase, I deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. To the layperson, to the civilian, they think, oh, he's been to Afghanistan. When what he's trying to do is use smoking mirrors to say, yes, I deployed in support of them, but I'm not going to tell you that I went to Italy and to one of the biggest resort cities of, Vicenza and everything, and I pulled security there. He's not going to say something like that, or will, in a rant, just, roll off a phrase of the weapons of war I used in war. Okay. Immediately people will be, well, he's obviously been to Iraq or Afghanistan. Any professional soldier, but any highly professional sergeant major knows you don't use that language. You don't try to give the impression that you're something that you're not. And that's the whole thing. I don't know the guy like Tom knows him and everything. What I see is a guy that wore the same rank as Tom and I, and he doesn't fit the mold of guys like Tom and I and the thousands of other that have been command sergeant majors since the inception of the command sergeant major rank. And if he would just, stop with all the BS and just come out and say, you know what, I'm not a combat veteran. All right. I embellished, I inferred, I did all of this stuff. And I was wrong for doing that. Then I would say, okay, I got you. But because, you guys use the word arrogance and narcissistic, I think that's spot on. You cannot get a narcissist to ever think that they are wrong, because there are people out there that will continue to believe them and believe their bullshit story. And that's what bothers me the most, is the language that he uses and how he operates in that gray area to suggest that he has gone to combat. He has gone to the places that Tom and I have been and everything, and all millions of other troops. He wants to be a part of that. And so he'll operate in this gray area. And to me, that shows a lack of character and a lack of credibility. And someone like that, you can't trust.
No.
I mean, and he's field artillery. We're not talking about someone who's in a traditionally support role, right? I mean, like what
He's a
field
frontline
artillery
combat unit, you know? I mean,
Yeah. Just for people who don't know, field artillery is hyper competitive. They compete with themselves. They compete with other units. They compete with other line units, and they're called the king of battle. You know, like, you don't get to not go to battle when you're the king of battle. And then there's a cadence. It's king of battle, follow me, right? And follow me is like the watchword for the Army. You know, you get in front and you go, come on, let's go. That's what field artillery, that's their line in the goddamn cadence. And to not make that standard, to not make the standard of the Sergeant Major Academy, it's so beyond the pale to then act like it. I've been saying for a while, like the stench of cowardice, it just never goes away. I don't know how to respect someone who, at the apex of their career, when the country needed them, had the opportunity to deploy, protect their neighbor and their neighbor's kids from the top of the position of that battalion, and they walked away from it, knowing that this was what would happen, this cast, the stench that would be over them, knowing that would be there. I don't know I don't know anybody else that has done that. I know people that have gotten out because of injuries and other reasons, but never this where they avoided when everybody else gets combat patches. I don't know anybody else like that.
It's just absolutely sad how it unfolds with him because I was thinking of that today. You know, I was reading an article about his DWI he had and how his campaign said that he was, you know, couldn't hear and he wasn't drinking and he drove to the police station and, you know, all this bullshit. He never corrected any of his own campaign. You know, he just let them have, you know, I'm sure he was in on the lie, you know, come up with this BS story. But then, you know, it all comes out, you know, that he did say that he was, you know, that he was drinking, but you know, he never says, I'm sorry. You know, he's never came out. You know, I don't know how many damn times he said he's a retired command sergeant major. I mean, it's hundreds, if not thousands. I mean, he's never went to the House of Representatives and said, you know, I'm sorry, I was not the highest ranking person in Congress here. I mean, I guess I like he said, maybe just stuck it or maybe whatever. I mean, come up with some BS story, but he never ever will. He never even brought anything up when people brought out his like this weapon of war thing and the retired command sergeant major rank. You know, his statement is, I'm damn proud of my 24 years of service, and now they're begrudging me for my service. And I was like, nobody has ever said a damn thing about his 24 years of service. I mean, that was, from what I gather, it was an honorable 24 years of service. But all of a sudden, when he walked out that door and left the trail of crap behind him, you know, that was all gone then.
I'm going to let you go in a second, John. Tom, isn't it true that if you go out and have a zipper malfunction and you fuck someone else's wife from the unit, whatever you did before that in the military, your career is gone? And I would put cowardice as a worse offense, as you know, to that. I mean, even a DUI, you've thrown your entire career away. God bless, you did 24 years. You're an adorable little baby now because nothing else is left. Go back and start again, right? And that's what we're talking about. Is like this is the kind of offense that cancels a lot. And I don't know. Yeah, so I'm going to shut up and let John talk. Go ahead.
No, I agree with both of you. You know, if I was driving 96 in a 55 and I was a member of the U.S. Armed Forces and I got pulled over, you know, I know I'm wrong. Okay. You know, when anybody that's been drinking gets in a car, they know that they are getting ready to do something that could really have an impact on their life and their career and somebody else's life. And when you're driving 96 miles an hour in a 55 zone with alcohol in your breath, and then you go down this road of I'm hard of hearing and, you know, no, I wasn't drinking or stuff like this. Come on, man. You know, Just own up. Just exercise some intestinal fortitude and say, I screwed up. All right. And through all of this embellishment, inference, flat line about going to combat, I mean, it's just a hole that is deeper and deeper and deeper. And the veteran community as a whole, I saw a poll today where, you know, 39% of the veteran community supports J.D. Vance and 30% supports Walz and 30% are still they're unsure of where they're at right now, but I mean, a young corporal who spent 4 years in the Marine Corps and deployed, there's more people that want him to be the vice president than they do Walz, who spent 24 years in, attained the rank of command sergeant major, but retired as a master sergeant. And it's because of this, constant episodes with flat line and his integrity. His integrity is shot. And, again, when you have that kind of credibility issues and that kind of character issues, you're not going to get the trust of a lot of people, especially in the military and veteran community.
John, if you're his brigade sergeant major and he comes to you and he's on the fence like this, what's your counseling to this guy? What do you say to him?
Well, if we're in the middle of preparing to deploy, now I'll give you an example. I was a Stryker Brigade Sergeant Major, Surge Brigade number 4 into Iraq in 2007 and 8. And I had an Ops Sergeant Major in one of my battalions come to me and say, "Oh, I got this going on. I got that going on." I said, "Sergeant Major, you are deployable. You have everything that you need. Your family is going to be taken care of. You're deploying with the rest of us. Unless you have something that is earth-shattering, eye, limb, or eyesight, or whatever, you're going." Well, he was not a high-level performer, and the battalion sergeant major, who's a good friend of mine, to this day was telling me, "Man, I don't want this guy." I said, "Hey, you got him, dude. All right, it's your job to mentor him." Well, the night before we deploy for the surge, he calls me, this ops sergeant major calls me and says, "Sergeant Major, I just fell down some stairs and I hurt my back and I'm going to go to the emergency room." And I said, "You know something, Sergeant Major, I appreciate you giving me a call to let me know that you are cowering away from combat. All right, don't worry about it. You're not going I'm not sending you. All right. The soldiers deserve better leadership than you." The night before, I mean, he had, so the point in all of this, excuse me, if somebody would have came to me and they said, "I'm looking forward to the deployment. I'm enrolled in the non-resident course. I'm happy to be a command sergeant major of a battalion and everything," then I expect them to fulfill the commitment that they've made. If they come to me after that and say, "Nope, I'm dropping my papers and everything," then I'm just going to say, "Hey, you're quitting, dude. You made a commitment. You are enrolled in the non-resident course." And hell, I think, Tom, he was close to graduating. He just had to do the 2 weeks resident down at Fort Bliss and everything. Then it changes the story. You made a commitment. Now you're backing out of that commitment. Again, it's a credibility issue and a character issue. And, I've seen some stuff, from, I think it was Tom's battalion commander that said, in his opinion, he's glad he retired because he got Tom Behrends instead. And I went from having this guy who was kind of wishy-washy to I got this, this farmer, this warrior leader that just absolutely made the tour great and the troops loved him. So in hindsight, maybe it was right the way we went because Tom Behrends took that formation into combat and everything. But in the end, it still does not excuse his commitment, then non-commitment. It's all about a lack of character, a lack of integrity. And again, someone like that, you can't trust.
Oh God. And then to have him that close to a national level, it's bad enough being government.
Absolutely.
When you look what he did to the state here, I mean, he's ran the police force into the ground and, everything else under the sun. And now, as vice president, Kamala Harris could fall down the stairs and he's president. And with the lies he's had and like my combat chaplain said, the 7 Army values, he's the opposite of every single one of them. If you go down the list, and integrity is one of the greatest ones because it's like, that's doing the right thing when nobody's watching. And he's doing the wrong thing when everybody's watching. I mean, it's just, you just can't even make it up. It's like,
when you've made the chaplain mad, man, you fucked it up. I want to ask this, Tom, and maybe you know a little bit about this because one of the things I know from speaking commander is, if the boss is like, hey, I don't want the sergeant major to go with me. And, you go 2 levels up and that general's like, Tom doesn't go. And then you have the backroom meeting like, Tom, you're just going to retire. Everything's going to be good. No one's going to be mad at you, but you're dropping papers. You're not deploying. Does that meeting happen? Do you think? Is this command driven?
Sometimes it is, but with this guy, that was the thing that, the brigade CSM, he got bypassed out of this whole thing. I mean, they end around it. Somehow Walz went around him, and nobody really knows to who at this point yet. I'm sure it'll get uncovered, but the brigade CSM said the same thing that was just said here. He would have told him, no, you are not getting out of this. You were in there for 6 months training up for this. You selected people that were on promotion boards and got first sergeants lined up, and you're lining all this up for the deployment, and all of a sudden you pull the pin. I mean, no, you're not. You're going to go, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, this is so unprecedented. I mean, could he have been reduced in rank down to an E7? Should he have gotten a less than honorable discharge for being a coward and getting out right when war was going on? I mean, to me, that's probably what the hell should have happened. I mean, instead of him sneaking out, I honestly think he thought he was going to get out with E9 retirement pay. Nobody's going to catch it. And the state caught it in October or whenever the hell it was. I mean, they're the ones that had to catch it. That son of a bitch didn't even go to the personnel NCO and say, hey, I need to have paperwork started out that shows I need to be reduced. It just sneaks out the door and, and then the rides on the coattails. I mean, I know CSMs that did not make it back, and they're buried in Arlington, and they can't speak. And I think we need to speak for them. And I think they'd be damn pissed if they knew this was going on in this country right now. This guy that's an imposter, military impersonator is what I found fits him perfectly. Just wearing rank that's not his and saying he was at places he wasn't, and just sad.
Yeah, and if I could, I'm sorry, Tom, if I could jump in there. This goes back to what I said about this lack of character and credibility. So you've changed your mind. You made this decision. You're going to retire so you can run for Congress. And Tom mentioned going to the personnel NCO. He knew that he was not going to fulfill his commitment to graduate from the sergeant major course, which was a prerequisite for him to be able to retain the rank of command sergeant major and retire with full pay and benefits. He knew that he was not going to get that, but he didn't tell anybody. He just went off. He retired. And like Tom said, if the state didn't catch that and adjust his NGB Form 22 to reflect that he is a retired master sergeant, he'd been getting retired sergeant major pay for the last 20 years, perpetuating a fraud.
Yeah. One of the things that we have in the Army is the NCO creed. It's the core of what we all do, right? And everybody at some point in their career memorizes it. And I know hard-ass dudes like you expect your soldiers to know it, your NCOs at least. And when you're about to chapter them out of the Army, when they're about to get UCMJ, you're going to throw that shit in their face because they have failed to meet the standard. I mean, I know that's how it goes. This is what we do. And so, again, when you're trying to make the standard, and the first words are, no one is more professional than I. And then in the middle of that thing, the heart of it is, selfless service. Does this compromise everything that a person is if they can't deploy from a field artillery unit in a time of war? I mean, how do we know when to accept what's true and what's real for someone like that, who has this incredible motto, who isn't faithful, all these things that they're supposed to be, and they don't represent any of it well in the military? How do we have faith that this person can possibly do the job? Is it at all possible for either of you?
Well, I'll just say that you've seen a lot in the news lately of, I think there's been 3 or 4 command sergeant majors at the nominative level or at the brigade level that have been relieved in the past few days. And a couple of them are friends of mine. And the reason that's given is a loss of faith and confidence in their ability to lead. And so that is kind of the tell-all of they did something, one might have been alcohol related, one might have been something else, whatever. But they use that phrase, lack of faith and confidence. So when someone backs out of a commitment they made, and it now is all about selfish service instead of selfless service. There's that lack of faith and confidence, and again, that kind of person can't be trusted. And again, I go back to Tom's commander's letter that said, hey, the bad thing was he let his troops down. The good thing was we got Tom Behrends, and it was exactly what the organization needed. And we went and we had this successful combat tour. So, yeah, I think it's a big deal when you violate that faith and confidence that commanders put into the command sergeant major.
Tom?
Yeah, it's just almost impossible to even expound on that, but that is the truth. With what's happened with him, there's no faith anymore from a lot of people out there. There's still some that still follow him and are ready to fall on the sword for him because he just got out at whatever time. But in all reality, what's he going to do at a national level if something unfolds that needs him to step up to the plate and be the leader of the free nation? I mean, it would be horrifying in my mind. I mean, back when the cities were burning and the mayor asked for the National Guard, he didn't do nothing for 3 days. And then when he finally had a news conference, then he said, well, the mayor don't understand the National Guard. All you're going to get is a bunch of 19-year-old cooks. And I got on the radio back then and I said, here's a shout out to all the 19-year-old cooks. I said, I'll take any one of you any day over this clown. I mean, we've all had cooks that are in the dining facilities wherever. They're trained warriors. I mean, if some SOB breaks into your mess hall and he ain't supposed to be there and he's going to shoot it up, they're going to be shooting back at him in a heartbeat. But, that's the sad part about this guy. I mean, he could have easily called the MPs up and called up other units that were close to the city. And he just had inaction. I mean, it's incompetence at this level. I mean, I've said it in the lap for a couple of years now. If he would have went to Iraq, I think he'd be hiding under his desk over there yet, because that's the type of character that he has. And he can tell people what the hell they want to hear pretty well. He's a pretty good political speaker and politician. He's got a chameleon skin to him where he's continuously switching. Wherever he goes, if he goes northern Minnesota where the mines are, then he's a mining advocate. And if he gets down to the cities where they don't want no mines in the boundary waters, then he tells them he's anti-mine. He'll switch his T-shirt back and forth. And that's the thing with this guy. I mean, he's buffaloed a lot of people throughout his career, but now on this national level, it's getting exposed. And he's done all this shit, and then he went to China for 30 times as a soldier. Who the hell does that? I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to run long here, and I got to cut John loose, so I'll just say a couple things. Yeah, and all of this goes away if he does deploy and he comes back and he just lives his life. Instead, he didn't go, and thankfully, Tom, you did, and you were a badass, and you're a combat hero, and I appreciate you. And same thing to you, John. You guys are awesome. I appreciate you guys coming on, and for the most part, I think we stayed right on the positive side and looked at what the standard bearers are and how they do things and what you guys expect from yourselves and from each other. So thanks so much for doing that. Real fast, John, and then you can take off. Anything you want to say in closing?
No, I just want to say thanks, Pete, for allowing me to be here. It's an honor to share the stage with Tom. And I will just tell you, I mentioned to you, Pete, this is the third podcast I've done this week. And there are hundreds of thousands of veterans that are absolutely pissed off because of this guy. And it's unbelievable that we have someone at this level that has shown integrity issues, credibility issues. And like Tom said, if the president falls down a step, there's the new commander in chief, someone that quit on the troops.
No. Yeah. Thanks, man. You can take off and I'll say goodbye to Tom. I appreciate you coming on.
Okay.
John.
Hey, I just wanted to, I know we're still on there, but Tom, I wanted to tell you, first of all, thanks for your leadership, brother. Thanks for coming out, when you did and how you did and everything. I really appreciate it because you represent the brother and sisterhood of the command sergeant majors. But I I just want to let you know, I know we're live, but there's a good friend of mine. I was on his podcast on Tuesday called the Citizen Podcast. It's about great American citizens. And this guy really wants you to be a guest on his podcast.
Oh, hell
His
yeah.
name is Dan Holloway. He's a very influential guy named Dan Holloway. And he asked me to reach out to you and say, hey, would you mind being a guest?
Oh, yeah.
I'll link you guys together via email
Yeah,
as soon as we're done.
Thank you for your service and welcome home.
All right.
Yeah.
Take care, guys.
Right.
All right.
Take
Yeah.
care, John.
Send me Tom's
I will.
email. Okay.
You got it.
All right.
I will take
Bye-bye.
care of you. And Tom, I'll give the floor to you. Is there anything that you want to say? I mean, we've said a lot of things, and again, look, I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt, the chance to recoup themselves. I've certainly had my chances, and I've had my fuck up, so I'm not above that. But is there anything that you want to say in closing and before we wrap it up? And again, like, honestly, thank you. You don't have to do this, and you did, and it means a lot to me. So thank you.
Well, and it was the right thing to do. You know, I mean, that that's what I told Liz Collin the other day. I mean, I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact how it's phrased, but it basically, for evil to persist, you know, it's for good people to do nothing is, you know, what happens and that's, you know, if nobody did anything and he got in there, you know, it'd just be terrible. So, you know, it's got to get out. The people need to vote on what the hell they think. And, you know, if this is the type of character you want in there, somebody that quits on his troops and doesn't love the United States really anymore, you know, it's a sad thing. As far as the civilian side of what he's done, you know, if people that are listening, if they want to buy the book, They're Lying by Liz Collin, that kind of goes through the whole George Floyd thing, you know, some of the different things that, you know, the horrible tragedy of him dying, but it goes on the other side, the things they covered up, you know, that the government really has done. And then the fall of Minneapolis, I mean, that's a big one too, this documentary. I mean, that goes through all of the burning and riots, all that crap. If that's what you want across the United States, I mean, then, you know, then he's the guy to vote for, because it's literally just absolute chaos with him in a leadership position.
Yeah. And, you know, when I think about all the sergeant majors, all the privates, man, all the dudes who came on contracts and were mail handlers, not all of them came back alive, you know, and all of us went out and did what we were supposed to do. And to be that close and to know that you weren't going to do it and to know that everybody else was going to go, you know, I just, I can't stomach. I was talking to a email group that I'm in, and there's a lot of folks who aren't necessarily against Tim Walz. And I use the example of, because this person was a professor, I use the example of, if I came to you and you were my PhD, you know, my guide, my professor who was going to get me through it. I didn't complete my coursework for my PhD. You know, I had a master's degree, but I didn't complete my coursework. And I didn't understand, you know, statistics good enough to explain what a dummy variable was, or you know, a complex, you know, way to examine a problem. And if I didn't have a lit review in my dissertation, but I went around and said, oh yeah, I graduated from whatever, University of Maryland, we'll say. And I used your name, you know, and this guy, instead of saying, you know what, that would be fucked up, and I'd be pissed off at you, he couldn't do it. Right. And so, look, some of this is political, but this is what we're talking about, right? We're talking about someone who said they were going to do something, half-assed it, then quit, and yeah, I don't know. I know too many people that were hit by EFPs and aren't going to be alive anymore. And I just can't, you know, I couldn't sit back and just let people think that they knew what the standard was and be able to say, well, he didn't know. Everybody knew. Everybody knew they were going to deploy. So that's just what I had to say about that. Anything you want to say? I'm going to let you have the last one.
Well, just on that same thing, it's, you know, be frocked as a doctor, and then all of a sudden, you know, you don't finish your education, but then you run around through the hospital saying you're a doctor yet, and you got your doctorate badge on. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just, you know, that's the civilian side. You know, go crawl under a rock. Get out of here. You're lying. You know, we don't want you to be around anymore. But then to, you know, just act like it's nothing. It's just crazy. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I mean, this is cool. I mean, these are,
I love doing it. I love that you stepped up into, you know, I've had a lot of great people on the show, but it's just neat when guys like you say yes. And again, I just cannot get over the fact this is the Guard. These are your neighbors. These are their kids. You got to go to the same grocery store as these guys.
Well, and that's the thing they brought out. You know, it's not just 500 soldiers in Southwest Minnesota. You got 1,000 parents. You have all the brothers and sisters, and then you got all the friends from every little town. There's 2 of us out of a town of 500 that were there, but we were the town's boys basically.
Yeah.
And every town has a little group there, and it covers the whole damn thing. And, and you abandon that whole works. I mean, I can't even believe it.
And every soldier, every one of your troops that suffers, that calls you or whatever it is, you and the commander from that time, you guys own those guys for the rest of your lives.
Oh yeah.
You're always sergeant major to them, and to not treasure that responsibility I'm just going to say it's disgusting to run away from that responsibility, because these guys need you, and you're going to be a talisman for them. You're going to be someone they look up to. And to run from that, I mean, like you said, thank God he did, because you got to be the right guy, and I appreciate that too. Anyhow, I really am going to shut up now. I get so passionate about this thing. All right, let me run these credits, and I'll come right back and say goodbye to you.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours.